Isn't it how the Comedy Slab has started to become geographically orientated? Hello and welcome to the Comedy Slab podcast, by the way. My name's Shane O'Connor. He's Adrian Lacey. And I was going to start this week's episode by talking that late, and giving it the old, giving it exactly the way, but mine slips in and out, so I've got to be a bit careful with that, really. And then we get on to talking about the difference between a Geordie and a Mackem and all this sort of stuff. So I don't. Maybe it's best we leave it. I guess we're going to slip into it as time goes by. But have you noticed that we do become geographically orientated, don't we? We've got 1 week we're doing Scottish accents. Next week it's really bad Welsh ones, stroke Pakistani.
They're all, yeah, exactly. They're all bad, but some are badder than others.
Yes, well,
we can only apologise, can't we? Really,
this is the baddest yet, I think. Anyway, we alternately look at comedy programmes each week. We love comedy. That's why we do it, because it'd be a hell of a chore some weeks it is a hell of a chore. Let's be honest.
It's more working with you is a hell of a chore.
I'm not on about the recording. That's before we even get to record it. But some weeks, if I've chosen badly or not to his Nib's taste or vice versa, it can be a bit of a chore. But we do, on the whole, generally like comedy. And in actual fact, I have to say, I've got to tell you this, Adrian. I've never told you this before, but...
you love me.
I love you, yes. Besides that, obviously, it goes there to say. But it's starting to... This podcast is starting to bleed over into real life now, if you know what I mean.
I'm not sure I know what real life is, but anyway, carry on.
In as much as I've got, at the moment, in my personal life, I've got both Mandy and Herbert Clunkerdunk on the go. Both as a result of watching them here and now enjoying them privately in my own boudoir. So that's cool.
We should explain to the uninitiated, he's not talking about having a joint affair or a menage a trois with two fictional characters. Good luck with that, mate.
Yeah.
Although I did have a rather weird dream about me and Stephen Fry the other night, but more than that, I cannot say for legal purposes.
Oh man, you've got to. If it's a dream, it's okay, isn't it? What happened?
Well, I don't know because nothing happened between us, but. Stephen Fry could take offence to what my subconscious did with the dream state.
Right.
I was in this gent's toilet. This is not going to go well, is it? And this is, I was going to say it's absolutely true. Well, it was absolutely true that this was the dream. I couldn't make this up. You almost literally couldn't. But there were two cubicles, one ordinaire size for the discerning gentleman, and the next one next to it was sort of double size.
What width?
Width, yes. Now it might have been, for people needing extra access. I don't know. The scene wasn't set that in that degree of detail. But anyway, he was only in his 30s, so it makes me think, that's possibly the Stephen Fry I worked with in Fry and Laurie all those years ago.
You thought that now, or you thought that in your dream?
No, I thought afterwards that might be what's going on.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's just bizarre, but it's not like it connected with anything in the day, or it wasn't a recall of anything.
Are you're trying to say that he's so gross that he had to go in the double-sized toilet whilst you...
No, I'm not saying any such thing, although you might want to worry about your legal ramifications for saying that. But I did go into the loo. Don't want to get into any scatological detail, but, I was on a mission, shall we say. And then imagine my surprise. So I think I might have spoken to Stephen just to very quickly say hi or something outside like you do.
Yeah.
Outside the cubicle, but inside the gents. Then I go into the cubicle. Imagine my surprise.
Hugh Laurie's in there.
Now that would be better. That's one of your dreams.
Yeah.
That might be your fantasy. But no, Stephen Fry followed me in, and I had to explain without getting too graphic that this was not my intended reason for going into the I nearly said cottage. No, into the
toilet.
Into the boudoir. Yeah, the toilet. Thank you. The cubicle. And being Stephen Fry, this is the funny thing. The subconscious. It's just much funnier than me. Stephen Fry was just so polite. Said, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I misunderstood."
A quick appeal for any psychologists that are listening to the podcast, please send it to me. Don't send it to Andrew because he's so delicate. But if anybody wants to tell us what that all means, I mean, I would. Do you know? It's funny because my wife will say, "Oh, I remember a dream I had last night," and I'll put it into Google. I wouldn't even know where to start with that one, really. I mean, what do I put? Stephen Fry in the toilet. What does dreammeaning.com
could come up with some interesting images?
I don't know. Okay. Oh wow! So don't you ever wish a question you ask and you think, I wish I'd never started that one now, but I did.
Exactly.
And so
was that you asking me how I was?
Yeah. We'll play a couple of clips between now and the end of the podcast of our chosen program, and we'll also.
I wish I hadn't gone there.
We'll also give it a mark out of 5 each, giving it a grand total out of 10. I mean, that's basically it, and we'll have more of the dream meanings of Adrian Lacey as things continue. I have no doubt. I chose Whatever Happened to the Lightly Lads, Series 1, Episode 6, entitled Birthday Boy, for us to look at this week. So we'll have a look at that in a sec. But before we do, quick look at the comedy news. It's sad news again this week, isn't it? It's really getting me down a bit. I think we're at that age where a lot of people we know are starting to pass away on us. Beryl Virtue, who, I mean, did such a lot for comedy. We were talking about it only a few weeks ago, weren't we? When we lost Barry Cryer, which was only last week or the week before?
That's 2 or 3 weeks ago now, I think.
Because I was just saying about how she was with Spike Milligan, wasn't she, at Associated London Scripts, and doing all that sort of stuff, and then went on to be a producer and did such a lot for comedy. And I just said to you just before we started recording, it's the 30th anniversary of Men Behaving Badly, which was the big thing for her production company when she finally started one. So we lost her, who had done so much for comedy, although thankfully her daughter still continues to do that. And then a few days later, Jack Smethurst died, the star of Love Thy Neighbour. He'd been in so many other things. He had a huge repertoire of work. But I guess he'll always be Love Thy Neighbour's Jack Smethurst, won't he? I suppose.
Yes. Now, I know the premise of that show, although what I do wonder is do you remember when, perhaps you're far too young, darling, they used to make feature-length films out of sitcoms back in the 70s. Yeah,
one of my favourite of those is George and Mildred, the movie. If you ever get to see that, it's quite, with Kenneth Cope as a hitman, which is quite how on earth did that get into the script? But yeah, go on anyway. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, and didn't they make a couple of Love Thy Neighbour movies?
Oh, possibly. Actually, what I think I'm confusing it with is Bless This House. I think I did see the feature-length Bless This House.
Oh, okay. I mean, the premise of Love Thy Neighbour, and it's got a lot of stick since, and I think unfairly so, actually, in as much as they tried to lay this at Warren Mitchell and Alf Garnett at one stage, and saying, it was just racist and homophobic and all of these kind of things, where you kind of think, well, actually, they were making fun of the character being like that and saying, this isn't the way to behave. And in a similar way, and it's quite interesting because a guy you might work with, actually, Rudolph Walker. Did you ever work with him on Enders?
Not, me and names, particularly names of actors. Not knowingly, but what character?
I know you're going to ask me what character. I've got
that is the next question.
But he was the black guy next door to the Jack Smithers character, and they just used to share sort of racial epithets at each other. Both sides, and generally the black guy used to come out on top, but if he didn't, then the wives definitely did and made the men look stupid. But Jack Smithers was always made to look a bit of a fool, really.
Right.
And I think obviously it's because of the name calling that it never gets repeated. And we've had that conversation, and I kind of think. But the interesting thing, when I was looking at just some research about Jack and his life and all the rest of it, and he was saying, he said, after I did Love Thy Neighbour, he said, I couldn't get arrested. I couldn't get work anywhere, he said. Because
that was amazing. Ended up working in a flower shop in Harrow on the Hill, which sounds itself like a sitcom, doesn't it?
Well, he said, I knew nothing about flowers. I hadn't got the first clue. I don't know, really. I think it was a friend of his helped him out, didn't it?
That's the running gag of the series, isn't it?
But he was saying it was nothing to do, he said, with the racial content of Love Thy Neighbour. He firmly believed it was just pure, old-fashioned typecasting. And one of the things he said, "Oh, you wouldn't get that now." And is he right? I mean, I kind of tend to think he is. I don't know whether you've got a view on this. Do actors don't seem to get pigeonholed and typecast? I mean, this week I think Martin Clunes is starting work on another series of Doc Martin, which will be the last, which has run for 18 years. But he's managed to do other stuff in between as well.
Well, that fine thing, what was it? Him as a driving instructor, which I almost never referred to.
You loved that, didn't you? You thought it was one of the best things he'd ever done. You can't stop banging on about it.
Bring it on. I mean, that's the one exception to my Unitarian rule. Every episode going, I lap up.
The whole thing kind of got me thinking, is it actors are better, or are audiences more forgiving?
Or more open-minded, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, but is there a case to answer for that? Is it in the 70s and the 80s were actors pigeonholed and couldn't get out of that?
Well, I wonder if it's yet another dimension, which is, were there fewer big-name actors then? You know, big name is a relative term, but you know, there were massive hits, like you know, on a wet Tuesday night, Are You Being Served could get 18 million viewers.
I think Love Thy Neighbour got something like 27 million or something on average.
I think, yeah. Well, certainly there were big audiences, but of course, not too many channels to split the vote. I don't know. There are certain actors who will not do interviews precisely so that people don't see them out of character, and that helps them believe in them in character. But that can have other effects as well, that you know, they're never humanized in the same way or seen as a rounded individual other than as their characters. But
I think On the Buses is quite an interesting one, because there were two people from that. Reg Varney left, I think, before the last series, because he kind of thought, I've had enough now. And I don't think he was a very serious actor. And I don't think he got a lot of work after On the Buses. But the other guy who kind of counters that argument is Stephen Lewis, who played Blakey, who I saw before. He's no longer with us, he's passed away as well, God rest his soul. But I saw him in Last of the Summer Wine, and he was doing the whole Blakey thing. He was going, oh my God, and pulling but it was great. But I didn't kind of think, oh, that's Blakey. I kind of thought, that's the character. I don't know whether we've changed, and maybe are we more sophisticated as audiences? I mean, when I'm sat there in my pants eating Cocoa Pops, I don't feel it.
Scratching your ribs.
Yes, scratching my nudges and thinking of Stephen Fry. I don't.
Well, each to their own, but I don't know. I think we're going to have to record an open verdict, as they say in Scotland.
Anyway, shall we get on with this week's comedy?
Yes, before we lose the audience as time goes on.
Yeah, exactly. So whatever happened to the Likely Lads?
You tell me.
I don't know about you. Part of my youth as well. This is parts of the backdrop of my youth. Was this same for you? Was it kind of always on the
Only
TV?
Backdrop in the sense of being aware of it being a massive show, but I'm not even sure I saw the one edition back then. I know.
Oh my God. Even as a kid, he said, no, I will not watch more than one.
No, I was little Lord Fauntleroy doing my homework.
Yes.
Look where he got me.
Yeah, and there was me sitting in front of the TV, and look where it got me.
Scratching your nudges.
Yeah, that's it's a bit sad, isn't it, really? So what, I mean, when I put this on the slab last week, then no thoughts one way or the other then, really?
No, interested to see it. Definitely interested to see it. And as I tend to say, with the older shows particularly, I'm enjoying them generally more as a bit of social history, and I'm sure we will come across that different attitudes and what's acceptable to say and do and what's not, and the appalling interior design that was the decade that time forgot and taste forgot.
Do you know, I was showing my son a picture of the avocado bathroom suite that we had in our house.
Classy.
And I said to him, do you know, I don't know what it was, son, but the 1970s, it's like we all went colourblind for 10 years.
It's true.
Crazy, wasn't it? But there you go. Anyway, should we have a clip from Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads? The two main characters, the Likely Lads of the title, Terry Collier and Bob Ferris. played by Rodney Bewes and
James Bolam,
James
but not
Bolam.
necessarily in that order.
Who could forget James Bolam?
You.
All right, leave it. And it's with him that we start. It's James Bolam we start, and his character Terry Collier. We see Terry's lying in bed. He's feeling very sorry for himself. His mom's already woken him up and completely forgotten that it's his birthday, which has given him a whole new set of reasons to wallow in his own self-pity. But his mate Bob stops by on his way to work. Maybe this will cheer him up.
Oh, God. This room smells like a Turkish wrestler's jockstrap.
Well, you and all.
Hey, some people have it easy, don't they? Tea in bed and the papers. What's this?
It's an offer for sexual instruction.
Oh, I Thelma and I did that.
What, wrote it or posed for it?
No, you fool. We gave them your name and address. If we get a friend to send in, we get ours half price.
Well, how can it be no obligation? Send 15 quid.
Well, I suppose it means you send you 15 quid for the manual, like, and then I suppose you don't have to follow the instructions.
Books. I'd rather spend the money on a Maltese brothel.
What made you think of Maltese brothel?
Oh, my mother was on about them a minute ago.
Your mother? Does she recommend them?
I don't know. She's never been to Malta. She's been to Boulogne. Her sister-in-law went to Boulogne on a day trip.
They don't have brothels in Boulogne.
So what? They didn't go for that. They went for some duty-free scent and a paperweight in the shape of the Eiffel Tower.
Look, I'll go out and I'll come in again.
And he does just that, although with much the same effect, unshockingly. You'll be wanting a headline, and I've been struggling with this uniquely. As you say, we all went colourblind virtually for a decade, and we forgot along with the decade what style was and taste, if indeed we ever knew in the first place. I'm inclined to go with that and say, sepia self. I suppose going full circle, I enjoyed it as a social document. Not an awful lot of belly laughs in it.
This is the old thing again. I can't discern whether it's nostalgia or talent.
Or neuralgia.
Or your neuralgia. I really have trouble discerning this between the two, whether it's just that it's part of my growing up, it's part of my DNA, or it really is clever. And I mean, it isn't porridge, is it? I mean, you're right. I mean, that somebody sprinkled fairy dust on porridge, didn't they? Don't you think that it was just all the stars aligned, cast and writing and
famous cousin Ronald Lacey, of course.
Yeah. I mean, who can forget for at least a couple of episodes? But yeah, I hear what you're saying with that. It wasn't that. I mean, did you warm to the characters Terry and Bob, or did you not like? Did you come away thinking, I don't like either of these guys? Or
it was. I just felt the James Bolam character Terry was just too bleak. But maybe that says more about me being shallow and wanting something to chuckle at, really. I mean, he was playing it. It might sound an obvious thing, but I don't know. I don't think you would have anything played quite that bleakly these days. You know, if you think of, it might be a terrible comparison, really, because they are different genres. But I don't know why. But the Royal Family, for instance, came to mind.
Yeah.
That. There's despair there, and there's frustration, and the options are limited. But there's not this hopelessness that you see in James Bolam. And you get a brief reprieve, but only brief, and then he's back to that again. It's like watching someone who is clinically depressed, because that's what the character appears to be.
It's a bit like that Kevin Eldon. It's Kevin. We looked at a couple of weeks ago, a couple of podcasts back. And he was saying about he was doing a Mickey take of the kind of Alan Bleasdale stuff, the Boys from the Black stuff and all that kind of thing. And I mean, this is kind of just coming out of the era of the the black and white kitchen sink drama, gritty, telling it as it is, no frills. This is what life's like.
Well, this is what Harry Enfield himself sent up as "It's Grim Up North," which has become an expression. It's so famous.
Yeah. So, I mean, because of that, you don't feel that then that then carries. Well, this is a generation who've just come out of the Second World War, isn't it? You know, they've either grown up during rationing or maybe would have been born during the latter stages or the tail end of the Second World War, and would have only known austerity, bleakness, poverty, and kind of think, well, can you forgive them for being a little bit down on it all? And you know, national service was still a thing, so you got conscripted into that, and there wasn't a lot to laugh at, was there, in sense?
No, but isn't that what? Well, I don't know. It depends on your school of thought and school of preference for comedy. You know, do you want escapist comedy, which is the complete opposite of what you've just listed?
Right.
But there's always been a mixed fare, hasn't there? You can have the cackles and sorry, you can say.
Well, I was going to say, doesn't he have to be? Isn't it like, you know, the antithesis of Bob Ferris, the Rodney Bewes character? He's bright and chirpy and optimistic and looks on the bright side and got a good job and he's going to buy a house and he's getting married to his girlfriend Thelma and blah 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 blah. He's like everything so they're kind of like the positive and the negative, aren't they, between the two of them? Yeah.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And I got that. I'm merely commenting on the depths of the bleakness in the James Bolam character. There's not even a hint of a smile for 90% of his appearance.
No.
And then there's a brief reprieve, as I say, and even that spoiler alert goes a little bit awry because it has to. But yeah, they are classic protagonist and antagonist. And Rodney Bewes, my mum would have referred to him as a bit of a dish or a bit dishy.
Right.
And you know, as you say, materially he's definitely done better because he's got you know, his sharp suit and better job, better prospects, and his partner as well.
Interestingly, I saw a note somewhere, and I'm not really quite sure where the whole thing came from, but saying, when I was doing the research for this, saying that Ricky Gervais and Steve Merchant have said that the show was an influence on The Office.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was at a Mike Leigh film showing once, and then I just read shortly before going, Mike Leigh was actually there, the director, who he rather does bleakness. I mean, Clue being one of his films is called Bleak Moments. And I actually asked him about it because it was an open question and answer thing from the audience. And because I thought he was going to say, you know, that again, that what you said about this show, that Ricky Gervais has said Mike Leigh was an inspiration. And I thought Mike Leigh might be slightly snobby about that. Maybe that was naive of me, but he said, no, he was really, really touched and flattered that Ricky Gervais was inspired by his films.
I'm sad in a way that you didn't, but again, maybe that is the thing. Maybe it's the nostalgia kicking in, and maybe there's the fact that you didn't watch it when you were younger, didn't heighten your senses to it for now.
I'm not sure because I don't feel I have the same experience with nostalgia as you. I mean, I do have it, but in other ways. I don't know that it colours my perception of a show. But hey, it might be those either rose-tinted spectacles or, in this case, sepia-tinted. But that some of the lines, when I watched it the first time through, I thought that line is almost calculated not to get a laugh. It's like his mum, James Bolam's character's Terry's mum. So it's his birthday. She first off, you think that she's the cleaning woman or something, and then of course no one could afford cleaning women. It turns out it's his mam. He can't afford to move out of home. Well, you know, what goes around comes around, sadly, in more recent times for a lot of people. But she's you know, she's observed it's a bit musky or musty in there because he clearly hasn't had a wash recently, or he's been, you know, retired to his bed for too long and hasn't opened a window, which he then does. And she says, oh, you know, what's your aftershave? Pickled onions for men. And is that ever going to get a laugh? I don't know. Maybe you could tell it such a way, but sure enough, it dies a death. No audience reaction.
I don't know. I mean, I thought the writing was it seemed to be more preoccupied with accuracy than comedy, maybe. Do you know what I mean?
I should applaud that as someone who's a bit of a stickler for detail.
I mean, I never at any point did I think oh, they wouldn't say that, or they wouldn't say that like that, or they wouldn't. I think that the dialogue was pretty spot on. But as you say, it's you then need to put the gags in, I suppose. I mean, the whole premise of it, and the whole thing is about they have a surprise birthday party for him, don't they?
You've ruined the surprise for us now.
Yeah, sorry about that, everyone. But for Terry, they have a surprise party, and it's how they set it all up and all the rest of it. I mean, even the plot is quite simplistic, isn't it? It's not. It's very. I was going to say juvenile. That's really that's too much. But
yeah, that's probably not fair. But I mean, I was going to say generally they were in those days plots simpler,
simplistic.
Do you think there's anything? Yeah. So uncomplicated.
But I found myself laughing at it, like things like they were talking about the games they used to play, and they said, "Oh, remember we used to play Dustman's Knock," and he was going, "What's Dustman's Knock?" And he said, "It was like Postman's Knock, only dirtier."
I did laugh at that. Almost inspired myself.
He said, and the other one we used to play was photography. He said, "What was that?" He said, "We all used to get in a cupboard and see what developed."
That's a very old joke. But that might have been the first outing of that joke, in which case hats off to them, because 10, 20 years later, Steve Wright was using it on Radio 1 or 2,
right,
depending on which one he was on. So that might be one of those jokes that's become part of the texture. I wonder, is it that we're better educated now, or does that sound just so snobby and intellectually snobby? There's more people than ever are going to university, or maybe it's just past its peak. But compared to the 1970s, do you think that's had an effect on the kind of humour we like and how we like our comedies structured?
Well, I mean, I would disagree that. What did you say? We're more what now? Did you say? Are we more
thick? No, educated, better educated.
Yeah, I mean, I would take issue with whether universities are a place of education or not. But I think I would certainly go with the word worldly. I think people are more worldly now. They're more, we travel more. I mean, in my own mind, I'm kind of sitting there and he's talking about this mucky book or whatever it was that he was going on about, and I thought, God, yeah. You could only get pornography printed. I mean, you haven't got anything on the internet at all. You've got a mobile phone. There's only, as you say, probably at the time, 2 or 3 channels to choose from on the TV. It was. I mean, it's not that long ago, but it was a lifetime in terms of its simplicity. Our life.
But our lives then, we didn't think this is a simple life. Our parents were saying, "Oh, we never had telly in our day. We just gather around the radio." I don't know why my parents spoke with a northern accent.
Well, not in Pinner. I've no idea what they were doing there.
Ours was a strange family, but yeah. So, and this is another reason I don't feel shortchanged. I think it's quite useful to have that, because one of my mum's many maxims was, "When it's gone, it's gone," and I'm sure that came from the war. Living under rationing.
Yeah.
She was taking dance lessons when the war started, and because of being brought up in northwest London, her mum wouldn't let her go out. For obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Once the Blitz started, so that was a very real thing. Oh my God! I mean, imagine really being brought up under those conditions.
And that's the thing. And I used to say to people, that well, I still do, that we as a generation, thank God, will never know what it's like to leave your house in the middle of the night, go down into an air raid shelter, and come back, and everything that you've owned, which wasn't a lot in the first place, is gone. And we have no idea what that is like, and this is what I say, is that I think it's kind of a product. Although the interesting thing is that I was looking at seeing what else James Bolam had done, in terms of acting in comedy, and I came across Only When I Laugh, which I don't know if you remember, which was set in a hospital with Richard Wilson, wasn't it? Was one of the doctors there, and his character Figgis was a complete misery again. He was just like this character reprised, So I don't know whether we're reading too much into the background, and whether he just as a character was a miserable sod. I don't, you know what I mean? I don't, because it happens, doesn't it? Is that he's not a product of his environment. He's just the misery guts.
And also, is it terrible geographical stereotyping that, I mean, Lefreni and Clement, aren't they? They're more from the south than from
Yes.
the north.
Yeah.
And are they thinking, oh, we need a miserable character? Oh, where can he come from? He won't come from Kent or from Hampshire or Surrey. He'll come from the North East League.
Yeah.
There I go. And so, you've got, and of course it was made in the South. It would have been made at BBC Television Centre, where I worked for years.
Yeah.
And where's that? That's in London. So it's a London view of the North.
Should we have another clip? I have our second clip of the outing. We mentioned earlier that his mum had forgotten his birthday. This is the major part of the theme, obviously, of the story. His best mate Bob has forgotten his birthday. It seems everyone has forgotten that it's Terry's birthday. But as I mentioned earlier, meanwhile, preparations are well underway for a surprise birthday party.
It's Bob's car. Now everybody hush. Are the two of them? Yes, yes.
Why Thelma's house?
You'll find out. Right, now put this on.
Hey, what are you doing, man? What are you doing?
Well, it's just like blind man's book.
What's that in aid of?
Is that too tight?
No, that's all right, but I can't see the point.
That's the point of it. You're not supposed to see. Now, through here.
Well, where's his present then?
No mad rush, no mad... Now, stand there. Right, now. Put your hands out.
It's a girl.
Very perceptive.
Thelma?
No, of course it's not.
Oh, good, I can enjoy myself. Well, I can't be Deirdre Birchwood, otherwise I wouldn't be able to stand this close.
Right, now turn round. Now put your hands out again.
It's another girl.
Correct.
Oh, I'm beginning to enjoy my birthday. Hey, which one is yours? Where does Thelma think you are tonight? Evening classes again?
Certainly not. They're both yours. It's your birthday.
Scheherazade.
Pardon?
Perfume, Scheherazade. She's wearing it.
Can you recognise perfume?
That one I can, because Janie Freeman used to wear it. Do you remember her? And as our relationship was a very physical one, her memory will linger up my nostrils for quite a few years.
And imagine her surprise when she hears this, because she's in the room, of course, at the surprise party. Surprise, surprise. We've got all this way without mentioning, and we didn't hear him there, sadly, the wonderful Christopher Biggins.
Yes.
And did you clock his character name?
Podge.
It's almost a forerunner of Porridge.
Yes.
Very imaginative nickname he has as this slightly fuller-figured gent wearing a wacky bow tie, which is how we know he's an eccentric character. Bless him, though. That was a bit of fun.
Although interestingly, he didn't play Podge. The character was in Likely Lads apparently, and he didn't play Podge in the original
You've done
series.
your homework on that.
Yeah, there's another
and
Podge.
I'd remembered it all wrongly because I thought this was a follow-up to When the Boat Comes In, which I did remember, and I did watch. Yeah, sorry about the accents, Pet. But I'd like to apologise to our friends in the north. It must be terrible for you. Don't blame me for that line. It's Victoria Wood,
isn't it? Though? Yeah.
from the north.
Yeah.
But that's her writing putting it in the mouth of a southern an announcer of all
Susie Blake,
characters.
wasn't it? That was Susie Blake played that character. Yeah.
Bless you for remembering.
Yeah.
Anyway, where was I going with that?
Well, can I ask you? Were you? Because obviously he was feeling the girls, and and nowadays you got
Not obvious to the listener, but
you're
yes.
not allowed to unless you're married or whatever. I don't know what the rules are these days. Thank God I'm married. I don't have to worry about it. But I do wonder whether nowadays whether they go. I mean, there's that line where they go, "Which one's yours?"
Oh yes, feminist it isn't.
But do you? I mean, you got the antenna for this than I have. I don't. I just think, it's just contextual. It doesn't bother me one way or the other. But did that kind of ruin it for you? Did you think, this is terrible sexist?
Well, it made me squirm a little, yeah. But of course, you'd be right if you were questioning, am I as pure as I want to think I am?
I mean,
Because I'm always laughing
this is
out
from a
loud.
man who dreams about Stephen Fry in the toilet, propositioning him.
Well,
but do go on.
nothing went on and nothing immoral took place.
Screw it.
And we both, said toodle pip and nice to meet you. It was the most civilized exchange with a gentleman I've ever had.
You're just not toodling my pip this week, that's all.
You could jolly well sling your hook, but don't toodle my pip. But I tell you what, I did remember listening to that clip just now, where look, he's not groping, but there is a degree of touching.
Touching her shoulders.
Yes, it looks like he's going to go for their breasts.
Yes.
But fortunately, our blushes are spared at the last minute, pretty much. But it's interesting, their reaction. I mean, they're obviously directed to react in a certain way, but it's a very sort of, this is fine by me kind of reaction, whereas you might get a slap around the face. But what it made me think of was Basil Fawlty. Do you remember this? Being called out to a bathroom where there's a problem. And he goes
To put the
he's
light switch
inside the ensuite. Yes, he put his hands out.
Yeah.
And he is cupping a woman's breast. But it's just done because Basil Fawlty is just an idiot, a buffoon type. It was just so ridiculous. I found that really funny. So I can't look. We were talking about offence last week. It certainly didn't offend me, but of course it could offend other people. I believe they're called women.
I mean, I really liked that because I thought that whole scene. I thought it was very well done. Although that whole party bit, I thought the blocking was a bit weird. Like two characters came and walked to the front. It was very theatrical at one stage and said something to the camera and then kind of walked back. And if you watch it with the sound off, as I did, because just to see what it looks really weird. I mean, the whole movement thing is a bit.
Perhaps they had to gather around the microphone.
Yes, I think so. I think they only had one at that stage, to be honest with you, at the television centre. But yeah, I kind of like that. I mean, we were both laughing then, just listening to, because I thought the timing was exquisite. The lines were great, and the fact that he just dumps himself right in it again by talking about a woman who's there. Well, twice he does it because he does it about Thelma, about Bob's girlfriend, and is she here? Oh no, I can enjoy myself now, then, or whatever. I don't know. I just thought I quite like that bit, but I do understand why people would say, well, it doesn't kind of stand up to modern scrutiny. Listen, it's got to be time to put some numbers on this, hasn't it? Really, for both of us. You should go first, I think.
And I should say, it's a BBC production in the days when you didn't have to say by such and such a production company. Much simpler world. And also, we were trying to work out the what year. So we at least narrowed it down to either 73 or 74.
73, 74, I think. Yeah, I think the second series was 74, wasn't it? But 73. We didn't mention the rift between Bolam and Bewes. I don't know. Did you know about that? Or
Oh, no, I didn't. No.
There was a massive thing, apparently. Well, according to James Bolam, he still to this day has never said he thinks there isn't one. And even when Rodney Bewes died, he kind of said, we were mates and wouldn't acknowledge that there was a feud. But Bewes apparently had given an interview in 76 and he'd said something. This is how the kind of folklore goes. He'd said something about his wife, about James Bolam's wife, and some believe it was about she was in labour or about to go into labour. She'd given birth, something like that, and he didn't know about it. And the story was that James Bolam never forgave him for that, and that's why they never did any. Because there was talk at one stage of doing reuniting them and bringing it more up to date in the 1980s, 90s, and see how they're getting on in middle age. But Bolam wouldn't have it, and I don't think they ever worked together again after that.
So presumably, obviously not a flattering remark about his wife, but that
I think it was because he'd been indiscreet. I don't think he'd said something rude about her. I think it was just the fact that he'd spoken about her, and that Bolam didn't want that to happen. And because of his indiscretion, he'd taken umbrage with that. But
then subsequently denied there was any such.
Yeah, he's really weird because he was paying tribute to him on a radio show, and I heard him talking about him, but he wouldn't acknowledge there was any kind of problem. I wanted to mention that. The other thing I wanted to mention as well, very quickly, because we're fast running out of time, is that, and this must be some kind of world record. Do you know there were 11 unseen characters in Whatever Happened to the Lightly Lads?
Really?
Yeah.
That's asking a lot of your audience, isn't it?
'Cause-
That's why it's unusually high.
Well, you talked about Deirdre Birchwood, who was the main one. But there were another 10 after that, or different
Wow.
that they referred to that were never actually seen, which I think it's got to be some kind of record. But
Yeah.
27 million viewers at its height. This
Wow. That's up there with the highest ratings ever, really, or among the highest.
stunning, isn't it? Stunning. Anyway,
I was going to add, sorry, if you're allowed to put little postscripts or post-it notes, I'll be very quick. There used to be an alternative, as we used to call it, alternative comedy well, we didn't call it cabaret, but a venue in Brixton called I'm trying to remember it accurately, but it certainly had Rodney Bewes' name in it. It was something like the Rodney Bewes, someone will know, the Rodney Bewes Cabaret Night or something like that.
Oh, okay.
And I actually did, an open mic there once. Never again, but... So there's the thing. Me and Rodney Bewes.
You never cease to amaze me. He did stand up. I've got to. This is
for all of 3 or 4 gigs, I think.
Yeah, it's 3 or 4 more than I would ever dare to do. I'll be honest with you, but
and it's 3 or 4 more than the older Adrian would do.
Yeah. While you're having a quick drink, let me tell you, the BBC didn't commission the 3rd series because Dick Clement and Ian Lafrene were writing the pilot for a series called 7 of 1 with Ronnie Barker, which eventually went on to spawn Porridge. So Porridge kind of got in the way of this having a 3rd series.
Give me a 3rd series. Anyway, you'd be wanting a mark. I think about half an hour ago you asked me to mark this out of 5, as we do.
Go on.
I've got to give it 3 out of 5. So for me, that's not as in LOL, not too many LOLs, although there were some, as we've said. Just valuing it as it's part of the comedy scene, it's part of our comedy heritage, whether we know it or not. And I enjoyed the social history element, and I enjoyed some of the lines and some of the profoundly unsound goings on as well. 3 out of 5.
You are a big fan of profoundly unsound goings on, aren't you? I mean, there's no question about that.
Well, that's where we came in.
Exactly. I, on the other hand, I love it. I mean, I must admit, and I can watch this over and over again to the point where I either drive everybody insane or I learn the lines one or t'other, or possibly both. I don't know. But so to that end, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5, giving it a grand total of 7 out of 10.
Okay, so follow that is the phrase. Well, we're going to follow it with something a little bit newer, but actually I'll need to do my homework unless you know off the top of your head, because we did briefly discuss this before going to air, as we used to say. I thought it would be, actually no, it's my girlfriend, I cannot tell a lie. She suggested 30 Rock, which as soon as I see it written down, I almost want to read it out as Third Rock from the Sun. And I'm sure I confused the two in the early days. 30 Rock is a reference to the Rockefeller Center, where you were telling me you'd had a meal outside or a drinky.
Yeah, no, we had dinner outside. I think we've had dinner outside a couple of times, actually, when we've been in New York, yeah, with... in Rockefeller Plaza down there, where they got the ice rink and all that business around Christmas time. It's really, really quite lovely. But
you're creating some wonderful, crisp images for us. Well, they'll all be revisited, no doubt, as you watch 30 Rock. And I'm going to steer you to not the first ever episode. What we're doing is a body swerve around the pilot, which went out as effectively the first episode. So we're going for Series 1, Episode 2.
Oh, okay. Don't forget we're on all the major players when it comes to podcast listening. And don't forget to listen to our sister podcast, Who's Adrian Dreaming About Being in the Toilet With? This week, Adrian dreams about being in the toilet with Stephen Fry, as we've heard. So don't forget you can catch up with that. He's actually eating cheese at 11 o'clock every night just to make sure.
It must be that time. And, well, you've stolen my thunder, which is that I'm going to the BBC with a brand new comedy idea, which is called A Little Bit of Fry and Lacey.